there's a friend of mine in Alaska who gives his testimony often in drug rehabilitation programs and all over the place. He's got a pretty big voice in that community. And he tells the story of his coming to Jesus moment. And before he came to Jesus, in his 20s, he had gotten so bad with the drugs. This is somebody I grew up with and running amok with. But he had gotten so bad with the drugs that he was shooting cocaine. He was shooting cocaine into his veins. Right. He was shooting into his neck vein. And if you ever met him, he's got a big neck vein whenever he talks. But he says he was sitting in a crack house, and there was a gentleman across from him smoking crack, and this gentleman had smoked crack for a very long time. And my buddy is sitting there across from this guy smoking crack, and he's shooting cocaine into his neck. And this guy who's smoking crack looks at him and says, "Man, you got problems. You need Jesus." And my buddy says he walks out of the crack house, he looks up in the sky, and it's a crystal clear night. He sees all the stars, you could count them, and he says, "There's got to be more for me. If this guy who's smoking crack is looking down at me, I'm in a bad way." And a few nights later, in an abandoned house, he gets saved by Jesus, by the police arresting him, but him going to jail and going to treatment and learning about Jesus. And so this man, a year and a half later, God used in a powerful way to get my attention on Jesus, because I had grown up with this guy. And when he came to Jesus, something changed, big time. And he witnessed to me about Christ. Now, people were praying for me. There's a lot of things that went into it. But God really used this man to show me Jesus. And today, he goes around into the far reaches of Alaska, into the bush, we call it, off the road system, you call it in Alaska, where you can only get in by plane or by boat. And him and this group of missionary people that he's sort of attracted, and there'll be 2 or 3 of them. They'll pray for a month. They'll pick a village. Some guy will drop them off in a plane and take off and won't be back for 3 days. They don't know anybody in the village. They walk into the village, and they're like, "Who are you, white man?" And he's like, "Jesus sent us here." And literally within the day, there is salvation in this village, and people getting baptized, and testimonies, and worship in very dark places, and it's just amazing. God is using this guy. My question for us this morning is do you feel qualified to jump into the mission that God has started long ago, but that God has started, of seeing people come to know Jesus? Do you feel qualified to tell people about Jesus? And some of you may say yes, and some of you may say, "No way, you should see my life." We're going to see what the Bible has to say about every single believer, whether or not we are qualified to point people to Jesus or not. We're going to look at 2 regular guys who God is going to use in a mighty way, Moses and Aaron. We're in chapter 6 of Exodus, if you'd go there now, if you're not already there. Now, like I said, there's a genealogy, okay, and I could butcher that thing for you, but I'm going to just spare you the details. Basically, it's a real genealogy of people. And in the middle of this genealogy, it talks about the birth of Aaron and Moses. And that's what the genealogy at this particular time is pointing us to. Okay, so I'll read, I'll skip, and then I'll finish. Okay, so it'll be on the screen. It'll be easier to follow along on the screen. Verse 13 says, "Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron and gave them commands concerning both the Israelites and Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring the Israelites out of the land of Egypt." Skipping now down to verse 20, it says, "Amram married his father's sister Jochebed, and she bore him Aaron and Moses." And then move down to verse 26. "It was this Aaron and Moses whom the Lord told, 'Bring the Israelites out of the land of Egypt according to their military divisions.' Moses and Aaron were the ones who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, in order to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. On the day that the Lord spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt, he said to him, 'I am the Lord. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, everything I am telling you.' But Moses replied in the Lord's presence, 'Since I am such a poor speaker, how will Pharaoh listen to me?' The Lord answered Moses, 'See, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and Aaron your brother will be your prophet. You must say whatever I command you. Then Aaron your brother must declare it to Pharaoh, so that he will let the Israelites go from his land. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart and multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. Pharaoh will not listen to you, but I will put my hand into Egypt and bring the military divisions of my people, the Israelites, out of the land of Egypt by great acts of judgment. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring out the Israelites from among them.' So Moses and Aaron did this. They did just as the Lord commanded them. Moses was 80 years old, and Aaron 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh." All right, a few things just jump out of the text at me. First is the author of the Bible wants us to know that these were two real people, Aaron and Moses. They were part of a real lineage, a real genealogy, a real family tree. They were two historical figures. They were real people. And another thing is that they were in their 80s when God called them to the mission field. Maybe some of you can resonate with 80s. I'm 40, and I know it's hard to do new things. I'm not going to just jump like I would have in my 30s or 20s. I don't have the energy to just jump every time I want to jump. But these guys responded, and they went on mission. And so the fact that they're in their 80s and are going to be on mission for 40 years, till they're 120, tells me that God is no respecter of age as he is no respecter of persons. He calls who he wants, when he wants, not according to our timetable. And that's good news for us who have yet to respond. It's not too late. And that's good news for those of us who have family members that we have been praying for years who have yet to respond, because it's not too late. God calls when he calls. Moses and Aaron didn't call God from a burning bush. God called them. But they did respond. It also tells me God doesn't choose or use perfect people. Moses and Aaron were not perfect fellas. They did not have a spotless record when God called them or after God began to use them. By the time God speaks to Moses in the burning bush, Moses has killed somebody and buried him. Aaron is going to lead the people of Israel to worship a golden calf idolatry. The man Aaron, who's going to become a high priest and lead Israel in worship, starts off with leading them to worship a golden calf in a moment of weakness. Aaron winds up slandering his brother later on in life, him and his sister Miriam. They get jealous of Moses' position, and somehow they talk bad about him or something, and God has to reprimand them. Moses neither Moses nor Aaron entered the promised land for the things that happened along the way. In a very real way, these were just two regular guys who God chose to use in a mighty way. In fact, the Bible shows us how this plays out over and over. In the story of Jacob and Esau, Jacob, who was born a usurper, becomes the name Israel. All the Israelites go back to Jacob. God uses this usurper as like a figurehead for this nation of Israel. Jacob was known for hoodwinking people. He hoodwinked his father. He hoodwinked his father-in-law. He hoodwinked his brother. He played favorites with his wives and his children. But God used him in a mighty way. The book of Romans says before Jacob or Esau had ever been born, and you could say before any of us, before we've ever done any good or bad, God has placed his love on us and chose whom he would choose according to his secret knowledge, his divine will, and it's a perfect will. It's not according to our good works that we're saved. It's not according to that, and that's good news for me. Ephesians 2:8-9 says, "For you are saved by grace through faith, and it's not from yourselves, it's God's gift, not from works, so that no one can boast." He chooses who he wants, and he chooses when he wants. Another buddy of mine in Alaska, my gang leader, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, he came to faith. Now, when I got saved, I walked out of that gang. I wrote him a letter and said, "Hey, bro, I'm following Jesus now. Like, I can't do this two things. They conflict of interest. I'm gonna do the hokey pokey and turn myself around here. It's not." And he said, "Go. No, nobody is coming after you." And then I was praying for him at the beginning of my Christian faith. But I was praying for him thinking I'm wasting my breath. There's no way. This dude is hardened. And now here he is, a Christian, not because of my prayers. I'm sure that there are a million people praying for him, and not because of my prayers. But what I'm saying is I wasn't wasting my breath. You could have never, if you would have seen this guy 10 years ago, you would never say he would be posting TikToks on, videos on TikTok, worshiping the Lord, jumping around, praising Jesus, but it's happening. And now he's got a platform where he's reaching thousands of people, giving them hope to come out of addiction, to come out of a life of drugs and alcohol and gangs and all that. And God's using him in a mighty way. My main idea is God chooses whoever he wants, whenever he wants, to do whatever he wants.